We've all been playing Spider-Man like crazy here in the office, and we've got some tips for players who are just starting out. Here are some things you might want to know the gist of before diving in if you're a beginner. Oh, and just so you know, most of the footage I used to put this together is early in the game, so this is completely spoiler-free for you. But let's get started off with number 10. The first thing we need to talk about is web throws. In combat, it's really useful to use these as much as possible. You know, the thing where you see to press the two triggers to throw an object at someone. Something you might not immediately realize is that they behave differently based on the circumstance, so factor that in. Your standard ground-based web throw attack will swing around and hit some dudes before being slammed into your target as kind of an area effect, but it isn't the fastest attack out there, whereas an aerial-based web throw when you're up in the air is quick and it slams the object right down, but it doesn't really catch dudes in its arc at all. But again, like I said, it's quicker and it's a straight shot, and you're in the air, which is always better, and that leads to my next point at number 9. This is a good point, but it's a simple one. Don't think like it's like a Batman Arkham game. You're not the best off in the middle of a crowd. You should always stick to combat in the air as much as possible, with a couple of caveats. Holding square gives you that uppercut punch, and early in the game, that's the easiest way to get dudes up in the air. From there, you're a bit safer from attacks, which is really the biggest thing. Then you have some combo options. You can combo the dude some more, or slam him back down to the ground and possibly into another enemy. As you unlock more abilities, you can do even more things in the air. Really, being in the air is the way to go, especially when you mash triangle to zip over to another enemy. Once you get a good rhythm going, you can fly around above enemies' heads left and right. The only thing I want to say though is just not to get too used to only relying on this. Don't get too comfortable, because later on there are some enemies that'll mess you up good if you try and get them in an aerial combo. I'm just saying. But moving on to number 8, if you're a beginner at the combat, you should let enemies shoot one another. Yeah, this sounds absolutely brutal. I know it's not an M-rated game, but it's something in combat you may not have realized. While you're dodging around, your spider sense alerts you to an enemy's aim and line of sight right before they fire. What you may not initially realize is that the gunfire can hurt both you and actually the enemies, so position yourself behind the enemies before someone shoots, and your foes will take some of that damage. I mean, really, they should just immediately die because it's a gun, but then again, this is a video game. Next at number 7, listen, don't forget about your gadgets. It's super easy to get wrapped up in the traversal and combat mechanics and just forget about them completely. I know I did, but that said, maybe don't. I mean, really, at first, you don't need to get way into all of the tools at your disposal and figuring out how to integrate them into combat, but it sure makes things a lot easier and more rewarding as you start to really get the flow down. And even outside of combat, especially once you get into later areas, you might find yourself stuck for a second. If you do find yourself in that position, think of the gadgets, you dummy. But moving on to number 6, it's important to keep an eye on benchmarks for extra sweet XP. The game has its own independent in-game achievement tracker labeled benchmarks, which keep track of various activities and feats you accomplish while swinging around Manhattan, and it doles out XP upon checking some of these things off. Benchmarks include things like swinging close to the ground X amount of times, diving X amount of meters, performing finishers, performing perfect dodges while running a set distance, you know, stuff like that. It's all stuff you're likely doing anyway, so you might as well check in and keep track so you can be rewarded with some of that sweet XP. Start checking off those boxes because you're gonna need all the XP you can get. Now at number 5, you should definitely prioritize radio towers. It may come as a no-brainer to those who have played a lot of open world games, but definitely prioritize hacking all the radio towers and filling out your maps. So much of the game is unlocked by using various coins from completing world activities and earning various activity tokens, and completing the towers makes it way easier to find and complete these tasks. It also removes the fog over the map and fills it in, so that's a pretty great bonus too. It's also a good way to get acclimated with the map in general, just if you're not too familiar with the shape and layout of Manhattan. Going around and knocking out all the towers will help give you a little familiarity. Like for example, there's a giant park smack in the middle of Manhattan that you might want to avoid trying to swing across. Now at number 4, for a quickie, you should stick dudes to walls. If you shoot webs at a dude or like web grenade them when they're next to a wall or an object, it just sticks them straight to the wall, which is pretty useful. As opposed to just restraining them to break out after, if they're near a wall and get auto stuck, they're immediately taken out of the fight completely. Sometimes it's just a good way to save a few punches for someone else while you're dealing with so many enemies at once. Now coming down to number 3, let's talk about some little movement and traversal things. While you're running around and swinging, everything is about speed and getting somewhere as quick as possible. If you want to stop short while swinging, pull back on the left stick and hit circle, and Spidey will essentially emergency brake. It's a good way to stop because you're gonna kind of have a tendency to overshoot wherever you're headed because swings are always so epic. And since a lot of animations are stylized and you'll always overshoot stuff or accidentally run off a ledge or something like that too fast, know that you can actually just hit circle to hop off or hop down from stuff too. It's stupid, it's simple, but it took me a minute to realize that. Also, if you're trying to run straight up a building, don't worry about dodging a fire escape. You might think that that's an object and you can just hit it and it'll mess you up, but Spidey can actually run straight up it, and there's a cool little animation for it too. Sometimes it's just the little things. At number 2, let's talk about higher quality screenshots. The super advanced photo mode and the selfie photos have already led to me seeing freaking loads of cool fan-made screenshots on Twitter, Instagram, and even Facebook. Everyone is doing it, everyone seems to be having fun sharing, and I got a pro tip for higher quality screenshots. I actually never realized this myself after using a PS4 for years, but you can actually go into the share settings with the option button after opening the share pop-up screen, and then right in screenshot settings, you can switch from JPEG to PNG, meaning you'll be able to get and share better images. Shout out to user FantVidya for pointing that out. And for the layman, PNG is a lossless compression format, meaning it's better for sharper, cooler pictures of Spider-Man. Go ahead, send one to your grandma. Now at number 1, let's talk about some of the best skills to unlock. Because I mean, really, the game is designed so that there's no wrong answers. It's a matter of opinion with what skills you want to pursue first. But I got 1 or 2 I highly recommend unlocking ASAP. First, there's Perfect Dodge. When this is enabled, it means if you time a dodge with the Spider Sense marker perfectly, Spider-Man will dodge while also hitting them with a little blast of web in the face, temporarily stunning them for a crucial second or two. Chain Finisher is another good one to save and spend on early on because it makes you a badass who can do 2 finishing moves in a row instead of just 1. You'll be really glad you have that. And then later on, Payback and Wrecking Ball are other combat ones worth considering. But if you're talking about getting around town, save up and work your way through to get to the charge jump. This is something you might remember if you play older Spider-Man games where you can hold the jump button and then release it and jump way higher. It's a good way to get up in the air quickly while sprinting, and it just feels right. But those are some quick beginner tips if you're jumping into Spider-Man PS4 for the first time. Honestly, it's a fairly simple game, but the combat can be challenging, and we're just loving the game, so we want to talk about it as much as possible. But we also want to hear from you guys. If you got any tips to share for beginners, or some things you noticed from playing the game for a long time, whoever you are, we want to hear from you and what you think about Spider-Man down in the comments. If you learned a thing or two, clicking the like button really helps us out. We definitely appreciate it. And if you're new, you should consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell because we put out new videos every single day. But as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.